Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so today I thought we'd have a chat about cartridge collecting in 2025. Now, as we know, prices of cartridges over the last couple of years since the pandemic went a bit wild, and I know in America their prices have gone really high. UK the same. PAL Super Nintendo went really expensive and out of reach for a lot of us. I know myself, I thought I'd never get back into PAL Super Nintendo because of the high prices. But in 2025, I'm starting to see the prices come down a little bit now. They're starting to get a bit more back to where they were 5 years ago, which is fantastic. For us collectors, we can now enjoy the hobby a bit more and pick up the games that we probably couldn't have picked up last year or the year before. So that's a really good thing. But yeah, I really just wanted to have a chat about the current state of cartridge collecting because, as I say, prices have fluctuated and they're now starting to come down. But it's also, I've had a lot of clarity myself in the last few months really about what I'm actually trying to do with this. As you know, I've been filling in the gaps and completing collections, disc-based collections, such as I did my PlayStation 3 last year, done my Xbox recently, finished that, and I'm in the current process of finishing off the 360. But I'm getting ever closer to going back to the 90s, so the only disc-based system then will be the PlayStation. And the PS1's just a kind of one of those systems that will just pick up games every now and again. So it's not a dedicated focus, whereas the cartridge is really my bread and butter and what I really enjoy the most when it comes to collecting. And of course, my main priority will always be 16-bit collecting. And as you know, and if you don't know, previously I have picked up last year a PAL Super Nintendo Super Mario World pack and also a Mega Drive Ultra Beast pack, both in really nice condition. And I'm really happy to have gotten those. I've picked up a few games for them as well. And initially my plan was I was just going to go PAL and I'd be happy with that. I've got all my systems PAL. Don't need to go into the imports again. I've done the imports before. But, as time's gone on and I've thought about it and I've spoken to people and I've talked to my good friend Time Warp James about this as well. And I mentioned in the video recently, he made a really great point to me about cartridge collecting. And, in terms of like 16-bit, he doesn't see it as being like PAL, Japanese, NTSC or American NTSC. He just sees that all the games on his shelf are Super Nintendo because it is the same platform. And that really gave me a bit more clarity as to what I was trying to do because, if we talk about region, I don't know about you guys, but me personally, I've always had a dedicated region. So in my early days of YouTube, I was the English guy collecting American Super Nintendo in the box in immaculate condition, as mint as I could get them. And I built up a substantial collection doing that. But I also dabbled a little bit in the Japanese market. And in 2017, I went into PAL collecting. And I've always sort of done that. I've always been either I'm a PAL collector or I'm an NTSC collector, whether that be American or Japanese, and I may have the odd little other region dabbled in my collection, but really the main focus is one particular region. And listening to James saying that about all the games are for the same console, they just come from different countries and different regions, and therefore I don't see them any different on my shelf. It's just one Super Nintendo collection or one Mega Drive collection. It really started to make me think, actually it really doesn't matter. I don't need to be so tunnel visioned and focused on only collecting PAL consoles and games. When, as much as importing seemed a little bit out of reach in recent years, I felt like I really didn't want the pressure and the hassle of having to import things, and especially now being the way that we are because we're out of the EU as well. If you buy anything from Europe, you've got to pay import tax. If you're going to buy from Japan or America, you've got to pay import tax. But then I found out that the import tax had risen to £135 limit, which is fantastic. That makes it a lot easier. You still have to pay your VAT up front, but it is what it is. But, that's sort of opened the window a little bit and said to me, or opened the door a little bit and said to me, there is a possibility of doing import gaming. So listening to James's advice and seeing what's happened with the import tax situation with our government as well, it has made me realise that actually, no, I can vary my collecting. And I've also started to really think about the fact that I would always, as I say, go particular region, in this case PAL, but, financially you have to look at what's available. It's okay. Like a lot of you, I prefer the 60 hertz experience if I can get it. But you have to be realistic when it comes to money. That's what it comes down to. It's like, yeah, you can choose between your 50 hertz and your 60 hertz, your full screens, your borders, your full speed, your slower game. But at the end of the day, it also comes down to money. And if you're really savvy and realistic about it, it's the game that's important. The condition and the box and the manual and the cartridge obviously all comes into it, but the actual game itself. So I started to looking into prices of games and to try and do a better comparison between the three regions to see what was going to make sense. And I've really come to the conclusion that what I should just do is just own the consoles on its own and go by game basis and decide where to get that particular game from. Now, there's 3 games I looked at which are the high-end price games that I want for the Super Nintendo, for instance, which are for the Mega Drive, which are Shinobi 3, Mega Turrican, and Castlevania Bloodlines, or New Generation, I think it's called in the UK. Those games are always expensive. Now, I looked at the prices and it turned out that the Genesis had the cheaper versions of those games, which absolutely amazed me, because I assumed that because the Super Nintendo prices were so high in America at the moment that the Mega Drive would have followed suit. But apparently the Genesis, Mega Drive, whatever you want to call it, the prices are a lot more reasonable. The consoles are quite expensive in the box, but the games themselves are still very reasonably priced. And so I found that Shinobi 3, for instance, compared to the PAL and the Japanese version, was considerably cheaper on the Genesis. Mega Turrican only came out in America and the UK, or PAL regions. You can't get a Japanese copy, so again, cheaper than the PAL copy. And then Castlevania, well, it's expensive no matter where you buy it from, but the American one was the cheapest. And the Japanese one, Vampire Killer, is completely out of reach and extortionately priced, so I would never have been able to buy that anyway. But then I looked at other games, and it not only became apparent to me that it's not just about finances and about the regions that you prefer, whether you prefer 50 over 60 or 60 over 50, it also comes down to box art as well, which is another consideration I hadn't really put much into. And when I was looking at the Bitmap Brothers games, for instance, I have Chaos Engine both on the Super Nintendo and on the Mega Drive. Now, the Chaos Engine has the same name as the original Amiga game. It also has the same box art as the Amiga game as well. So being a big fan of that Amiga game that I played all those years ago, playing the Mega Drive and SNES version is like playing the Amiga version, but ported to the consoles and taking advantage of both of those systems and what they can do and what they can't do. And so I've got the original box art. That's great. That's ticked that box. It's called the Chaos Engine. That ticks that box. So there'd be no reason really to buy the American Genesis and Super Nintendo versions, because one, they're called the Soldiers of Fortune, which is a bullshit name and doesn't mean anything, and the cover art is absolutely terrible. Now, of course, I could just buy them to have that 60 hertz experience should I want to, and if I wanted to, I would do that. But from a collecting purpose point of view, it makes more sense and it's more nostalgic and I have more attachment to the name, the Chaos Engine, and that particular box art as well. The same with another Bitmap Brothers game, Speedball 2. You can get it in Japan, so you can have a nice 60 hertz version. It's not cheap, but the box art's terrible, and yet the PAL version has the correct box art, the Amiga cover. So to me that means much more as a collector and as a nostalgic person. It hits more for me than what the Japanese copy is going to do. So it doesn't always have to be that I have to just buy 60 hertz only, unless it's not available and I can only get a PAL version, for instance. I do have to consider other factors as well. And I wonder if any of you guys do that as well. Do you spread your collecting across all 3 regions or just 2 regions? Or are you very specifically just going for PAL, or if you're in America going for the Genesis and the SNES, or if in Japan, you prefer the Japanese 60 hertz experience? And then of course, also with boxes, you have the fact that the Japanese ones are very colourful, very nicely designed, have some really nice cover art as well. But then so do the PAL ones. I mean, the PAL SNES ones in all those different colours are incredibly collectible, and the Konami Silver Box series as well is very collectible. You also have the consoles. I mean, the Super Nintendo in our country, in the UK and also in America, had different variants. The Japanese box, the Super Famicom, I'll be honest, is a bit shit. I don't think they really made much of an effort. When you compare it to the Japanese Mega Drive box, which actually shows the console, whereas the Super Famicom has like an artist's impression on the front of it, I really don't know what they were thinking. I mean, if I would have gone into the shop back in 1991, say, and I was going, which one am I going to buy? I would have seen the Mega Drive and thought, wow, that looks really cool. Looked at the Super Famicom and gone, that box is a bit crap. Whereas America, they got like the Donkey Kong Country pack, they got the Killer Instinct pack. I think they got Mario World pack. I can't remember what else they got, but they got those. And then of course in the UK, we got a Mario World pack. We've got the beautiful yellow Mario All Stars pack. We've got the Starwing pack, which looks incredible. There's the purple Street Fighter 2 Turbo. We've got the original Street Fighter 2 World Warrior pack. We've got a lot of really good variants. So each region really has its collectability. And I'm just becoming someone who's gotten to a point now where I realise that really you need to be a bit more free with your collecting. Be financially sensible and don't spend like £100 more just because it's a 60 hertz version. when you can get the 50 hertz version. Okay, it may run a bit slower, it may not, it may be optimized, you just don't know. You can always find that out. But if it's got like the Chaos Engine and Speedball 2 has that cover art that's nostalgic, it has the correct name, it has the correct cover art, sometimes that's enough, you know, that'll make me happy. So yeah, so I am really literally just going game by game basis when it comes to the cartridges now. And I think I'm just going to continue that way. And, you know, I now own a PAL SNES, a PAL Mega Drive, a Super Famicom, and a Japanese Mega Drive as well. I would love to add a Sega Genesis into the collection, but I think that's going to take a bit of time because I have been looking at prices of box consoles and they are expensive at the moment. There's 2 packs that I was looking at. One was the Sonic the Hedgehog, which is the most common one. The other is the Altered Beast package, which, to be honest, I think looks even nicer than the PAL one. The PAL one's great, but the US Genesis box, the back of it with all the screenshots, that looks absolutely outstanding. The unfortunate thing is, for a really good one, you're talking about $300. That's a lot of money because, you know, it's not just $300. I've then got to pay international shipping, which is going to be very expensive, and I'll have to pay import tax because it'd be over the threshold, and I'll have to pay VAT. It starts getting ridiculous. So it would probably end up being the Sonic the Hedgehog pack I would go for. But also, the Genesis is not an easy console to buy. Because if any of you know who collect Genesis, you've got this thing called non-TMSS, and I don't know the full details of the legal side of what happened, but basically there was a point in time where the systems got changed, and they had, when you boot the game up, you get a little message that comes up, like a copyright message. If it does that, it means the sound's being gimped on your console. So you need the early high definition graphics models that actually have the good quality sound, like the high definition PAL model and the Japanese Mega Drives. But even that apparently is not that simple to really identify the Genesis that has the good quality sound, because there are different factors. I think there's a serial number as well on the bottom that also denotes whether it's a good quality sound Genesis. So the problem you have then is that some people in America know this, and they will list their consoles as non-TMSS, which means they know it's worth a little bit more of a premium because people want these, so they put the money up. So that's a pain. So you're always trying to find one that you can identify as a non-TMSS and save some money because the seller doesn't know what they're selling. But yeah, it's a bit difficult. So, and you know, if you start getting into the realms of asking questions, they're going to go, well, why are you asking about this messaging? You know, what does that actually mean? They'll probably do a Google research and boost the price. So yeah, it's a bit tricky getting the Genesis, but I would eventually like to do that because I can go down the route, obviously, of having converters for my consoles, but I don't really like that. I prefer to have all the consoles laid out and to just be able to pick up a game off the shelf that I want to play. Say like Shinobi 3, I buy the US version because the Genesis is considerably cheaper. Place that in my Genesis and play it, and not have to worry about any kind of region lockouts or, you know, converters not working. I just can play the game. Same with Japanese and PAL. So that's where I'm at with the 16-bit stuff anyway. So I'm really trying to be a little bit more free. You know, I'm obviously going to build up my Japanese selection quite a lot, as much as I can, but I'm also going to do the PAL, and I'm not going to constrain myself as well. If, like I've done with the Xbox and Xbox 360 and PS3 and the PS4 and Xbox One, I've got the same game on both consoles, and I will probably do the same here. I think there will be certain games, like for instance Contra 3. I'll get the Japanese Contra 3, have the 60Hz version. It's very nice. The box art is shite, but I like the Contra 3. I'm obviously going to buy Super Pro Protector, the PAL version, where you get robots instead of humans. That is a nostalgic purchase because that's the game I had back in the early 90s, and it means a lot to me. And I honestly prefer the robots to the humans. I just want Contra 3 in the Japanese collection, so when I'm playing on my Super Famicom, it's there, I can play it. You know, if it was like 200 quid more than the PAL version, I wouldn't bother. I would just get the PAL Super Pro Protector. But, you know, as I say, it's game by game. Every time I want to buy a game, I have to look at these factors. You know, is it a game that's nostalgic? If it is nostalgic, why is it nostalgic? Is it the box art? Is it the name? Is there something that's attached to it, like Super Pro Protector? Like that was the game that I had as a kid, and therefore it's got that nostalgic attachment. Or is it the price that's making the factor? You know, is the price too high in one particular region over another? So when you've got all the console set up, it's nice to have that option. I can just choose whichever console I want to play on, whatever game I want to play on, and it's always there. And of course, as I say, I can have the same game on multiple platforms if I wanted to. You know, if I felt the need, I might end up buying Soldiers of Fortune instead of Chaos, or as well as, sorry, Chaos Engine. Even though it's got no nostalgic attachment and I don't like the name and the box art crap, it'd just be cool to have Chaos Engine in 60Hz as well. So yeah, or just decide, no, I'm happy with my PAL versions, which to be fair, I am. I don't really see any need to buy a 60Hz version. I've been playing the SNES version, runs smooth as anything. Been playing the Mega Drive version, runs absolutely fantastic. You just have the borders, but you know, it's not a big deal. The only thing I will say is when it comes to like other cartridge systems, so like 8-bit, Master System is without doubt got to be complete. I've got to have them box complete. They're not expensive games at the moment. You know, for the majority of games I would want for the Master System, they're all fairly cheap and easy to get. So there's no reason not to have them complete. NES, I don't know. I still don't know what, if anything, I'm going to do with the NES. I looked into going PAL, but then I thought it doesn't really appeal to me. I don't have nostalgia apart from playing my friend's NES as a kid, so I didn't own one myself. I've only owned them as adults, so I'm a bit more free in that respect. I don't have anything holding me back. I looked at the American market, but it's quite expensive to get the consoles box. And then I looked at the Japanese market. The Famicom has never appealed to me, but the AV Famicom does, the top loader. That's a very nice console. I've owned that before. The only downside, I'm not that keen on the Japanese boxes for the games. And I could go loose cart because they're all multicoloured, so you have a really nice background in your videos. But it doesn't appeal to me. I've tried to do loose carts in the past many times for different systems, and it just never works. I realised pretty early on that as a collector, I prefer to have the complete product. You know, I don't need to have all the extra paperwork, but as long as I've got a box, cart and manual, I'm very happy and it's in good condition. So I'm not too sure what to do. I know instinctively really the best way to go is to just wait until I can afford to do it and go down the US way, get an American NES, get it RGB modded like I had years ago, and just slowly build up a small NES collection boxed. But that's in the future. I mean, at the moment, my main priority is absolutely 100% on the 16-bit market. And of course, I'm taking my time with this. I'm just dipping my toe this year because I have still got to finish off my 360 collection. I want to get that done. I don't want to lose focus on that. And then there's obviously after that, I've got a couple of N64 games I need to add to the collection. And then I've got all the PS1 library to invest into. So yes, but I will be honest, cartridges, since I've been playing them recently, been playing my 16-bit consoles quite a lot actually. I've got my Japanese setup here with the two systems, Super Famicom and Mega Drive. And I've been playing them non-stop every day. And you know, I've really gotten stuck into Donkey Kong Country, for instance. I'm absolutely loving that game. And I was playing Castle of Illusion earlier, fantastic, and Sonic the Hedgehog. And yeah, it really is, that's still a sweet spot for me, the 16-bit era. It's my favourite era of gaming. It's super nostalgic. The games are absolutely incredible from that generation. And so I'll always be more of a 16-bit collector over everything else. You know, I've said before when it comes to discs, disc media is great, but really for me it's about the game, it's not about the actual media. They're in DVD cases, Blu-ray cases, they're not exciting to collect really. I want them in nice condition so they're not knackered obviously, but really it's about collecting the game itself. Whereas when it comes to cartridges, and the PS1 is a slight exception in discs because I do actually like the PAL cases, and even though they're fragile, they are very nice. And the Sega Saturn's another one, has beautiful boxes. So they have a slight collectability to them. But when it comes to cartridges, especially Nintendo cardboard, you know, I mean, they're so hard to get in good condition that the thrill of the hunt for a Nintendo cardboard and getting them in great condition for a good price and having it delivered and taking it out of the box and being like, wow, and being really impressed with what you've found. There's no better feeling than that hunt and that exhilaration when it arrives. And you know, then the whole cleaning the cartridge process, putting it all back together, playing your games, the cartridge, putting it in, boom, you're straight into the game. No downloading shitloads of data and waiting hours on end to try and play a game. You can just play your game and it's on the cartridge. You ain't got to worry about any DLC or anything like that. There is just something so special about that time. And you know, it's always going to be my favourite to play and my favourite to collect for as well. So that's really where I'm at. I think, you know, with cartridges, it is a bit more freeing now that I have the PAL systems and the Japanese systems, and hopefully I will eventually get a box Genesis as well, and I'll have that American contingent taken care of. And it really just frees up my options as to where I get my games from now, and I can just take my time with it and not be so laser focused on one particular region, which can be quite restraining for your mental health, I've always found, at least anyway. So that's something I don't want to do anymore. So let me know in the comments, guys, where are you at? If you're cartridge collecting this year, how are you finding it? How are you finding the prices? Are you going loose cart? Are you going boxed and complete? How are you on the condition? How are you finding the market itself? Are you finding it easy to get the games you want, or is it a bit of a struggle? Are you taking your time and waiting for certain games to come down in price because they are so high at the moment? And where are you with regions? Do you, like I used to do, just focus on one particular region and you're happy with that? Or are you more varied like I'm trying to be and just, you know, go to all regions and just get the games from wherever you can get them from? And have you got like nostalgic attachments to certain games, like I say with the Chaos Engine, Speedball 2, and really those Bitmap Brother games? You know, having that name and having that artwork from the Amiga is a massive nostalgic touchstone. So yeah, it's an interesting time. I actually thought, you know, after the pandemic, the cartridge collecting was going to be impossible because Super Nintendo Power in particular, as I said, went through the roof, and American Super Nintendo went through the roof. Japanese Super Nintendo or Super Famicom has pretty much stayed the course. It's still the most reasonable one to collect for. You can still, well, most affordable, should I say. You can get some really good deals on the Super Famicom. And I've been very lucky with the person who sold me the Super Famicom and the Mega Drive in Japan. They've been a fantastic seller. You know, it's great to have someone in Japan who you can just message and say, can you find this for me? And they go, yeah, no problem, I'll try and get it for you, and this is what it's going to cost. And they don't rip you off, they give you a very reasonable price. Unlike a lot of what you see on eBay, where it's just so varied and there's so many of the same game or console available, it becomes a bit of a mental blockage sometimes. You get a little bit worn down just constantly checking eBay, trying to get a good deal, and you get to a point you feel like, what's the point? I might as well just give up because I'm getting too frustrated with this. And you know, when you've got a contact who can actually just help you out, it's the greatest thing in the world, really. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on the cartridges. Where are you at with the cartridges? You know, let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope it made sense, and I'll see you in the next one.